Hey, everybody, welcome to It's Real with Jordan and Demi. I'm Jordan Edwards in New York, also in New York, Demi Ramos with a hat. We are both wearing hats today.
Hat of the
We're
day.
both wearing black hats,
We're
and it's
bringing
almost like
back
two
summer.
on. It's almost two on that we're both wearing black hats at the same time.
We
Um,
planned this.
and the pink backgrounds too.
And the pink back we planned.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the same microphones.
And the same microphones. Yes, yes. Very excited for today's show. We have a very talented musician who's had a really interesting path through the record industry, both in terms of what she's produced, what kind of music she's come out with, and her navigation through the record industry. And she's got really great songs, both on the rock side and the rap side. So let's bring her out. K.Flay, everybody.
Hello.
What is going on?
Not too much. I feel like I should have worn a black hat.
Yeah, well, you're wearing a black pullover or jacket or something here.
That's true. My headphones are black, so I'm sort of in line with like the aesthetic of the group.
I appreciate it. We all appreciate it. What's going on?
Not too much. I'm just in my studio in LA, kind of getting the day started. Yeah, just surviving this pandemic.
How do you start your day? You said earlier that your girlfriend has you sleeping at midnight and waking up at 7. Is this an everyday thing for you?
It is. This is, what's interesting about this period of time, and I don't know if it's true for you guys as well. This is the most regimented and scheduled I've ever been in my life, probably since college, in terms of having like a routine that I'm actually able to engage with and enact every day. So, typically as a touring musician, I've been on the road now for 10 years. So I'm used to just kind of pure chaos, total unpredictability and no consistency. So the pandemic has really been like going to bed, getting up. I eat the same thing every morning. And I found it at first. I was, I think it took my brain a little time to adjust, but it's actually quite comforting having a routine.
Do you feel also do you ever feel like this is lame? I miss going to bed at 2 a.m. and getting up at 11:30.
Yeah, of course. There are moments when I yearn for the motion and chaos of living on the road. But I think actually I kind of had a breakthrough with my therapist, not to go so deep.
Right, let's do it. Let's go deep.
But we were talking, she was asking me, okay, like as we're sort of nearing this transitional moment where, life as we used to know it probably won't exactly be back, but some version of it. What are you going to take with you from this experience? Like, let's talk about that, just so we can kind of like enforce that as you move forward. And what I think I honed in on was this kind of delineation between like what is just stimulation and what is meaningful. And I think I kind of made the analogy of like what's noise and what's a song, and I think in my pre-pandemic life, I was seeking lots of noise, and maybe not always using my best judgment as to like what was a song and what was just like someone screaming.
You mentioned therapy. A lot of like my closest friends, for some reason, are all in therapy starting like as of recent.
Yeah.
And how has that helped you? Like, what got you into therapy? Like, I'm looking for a good therapist. Tell us about how that like is good for your mental health, like for you.
Sure. Yeah, I sort of have perhaps a little bit more, God bless our therapist. I had really, really bad OCD as a child. And so I actually started seeing a psychologist when I was quite young, like probably about 9, 10, for like a 2-year period around then in sort of my like elementary school years. And then I actually saw the same psychologist again because I was kind of having a flare up when I was like 19.
You make it sound like it's like a colon issue or something. I was having a flare up. Yeah.
I mean, so this is like lightly, I don't think it's controversial, but my attitude about mental health and therapy is sort of like the mentality about physical therapy, which is that you go to physical therapy when you're having an issue flare up. you get techniques and strategies, and then they set you out into the world, you know. And I do think like that model of therapy and mental health for me, and like the stuff that I deal with, has been extremely helpful. So I'm basically like, it seems like every 10 years I have like a flare up. So I'm just, you know, I'm dealing with that flare up. And
so you're in between flare ups right now. You're like mid.
Yeah. I'm like exiting a flare.
Exiting the flare. The
Yeah.
flare is in the rearview mirror and you're going towards something better and brighter.
Correct. And, you know, like Demi, to your point, I think this pandemic has, you know, we're all just sitting around thinking. There's a lot of time to sort of get lost in the chaos of your own mind. So I feel like this has been a good time for therapy if you're open to it, because those distractions just aren't there. So you are able to focus a little bit on that kind of like change and growth.
You have a new single out, newish single. It's I Don't Care Anymore, collaboration with Jack Sanderson.
Oh yeah.
It's such a great song. It's such a laid back, like it kind of reminds me of No Name, if you're familiar with No Name. Totally. Which would be an amazing collaboration. A K.Flay No Name collaboration would be so sick. But it was kind of a spontaneous song, right? And it went through the whole process very quickly, correct?
Totally. So I know Jax. I met Jax actually just in passing at Voodoo Fest, like, I don't know, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, something like that. And then Jax, our paths kind of crossed a few times. She was opening up for a Bishop Briggs tour that also my girlfriend was the other opener, and Bishop is one of my close friends. So so Jax was doing that. And so like our paths were kind of crossing. And then she posted like a little demo of the song on TikTok, and a bunch of people tagged me in it, being like, you should like K.Flay, jump on this, like do this.
The internet wins.
Yeah. And then I saw that and I was like, oh man, this song's rad. And then one of my best friends and collaborators, Tommy English, who's a producer, he texted me and was like, hey, I'm going to help like finish producing this song. Do you want to feature on it? Can you come over tomorrow? And I was like, oh my God, it's like the old days. And Tommy's the one person I've been seeing in person because we've been working on music. So yeah, I just came over, like we looped the track. I wrote a verse in like 20 minutes, recorded it, and it was literally out.
And there's a video too. You did a video
We shot a video. Jax was like, we were like planning, okay, we'll meet in the park on Sunday. And and she directed, like filmed, edited, everything. Like she's amazing. So
well, it looks great. It sounds great. It's a really fun song. But I guess your most recent official release is the cover EP. Yeah. Don't Judge a Song by its cover. And I want to talk about your song selection here. First of all, you have Offspring, Self-Esteem, and Green Day, Brain Stew, and then Limp Bizkit, Break Stuff. I really love the Brain Stew cover. It's great. I kind of wish there was a Jaded part that you would have like pushed through and done the whole thing, but
right.
But that's cool. But I'm really interested in the Break Stuff cover because I'm curious how much irony is there, because you and I are roughly the same age, and we were kids during the Limp Bizkit maelstrom, the Fred Durst, Hurricane Durst.
Right.
So how much of that is love and how much of it is kind of like, this is a stupid ass song, but I'm going to make it sound cool?
Well, I think, and I could probably talk for quite some time about this, so shut me up if I'm going on ad nauseum. But so to start things off, I wasn't like listening to this when it came out. Like I honestly didn't really listen to this song Break Stuff, the original song, until like 3 years ago. So I kind of came into the new metal world and its adjacent genres quite late in life.
So what were you listening to in 6th grade when new metal was like at its peak?
Like nothing really. I didn't really listen to that much music as a kid. I mean, it was sort of like in the ether, of course, and I was aware of it in a broad sense, but I wasn't emotionally connecting with music until I went to college. So a lot of that stuff that happened, that came out in my like teenage, preteen years, I was just like, I know who Limp Bizkit is. I mean, I think my main association was like West Borland with the Contacts. And I was like, in my mind, I'm like, this is scary music. And I don't like scary music. Like,
yeah, it was dangerous. It was dangerous. And it was stuff your parents didn't want you to listen to.
Right. And like,
I feel like we've entered an era and where in the 80s and 90s, there were all these musics from heavy metal to gangster rap to rap metal to the Marilyn Manson kind of scare. And we won't go down that rabbit hole, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And now I feel like it's really a lot harder to shock parents with music. It's been a really long time since like some band or act or rapper, whoever came out and parents were like, oh no, my kids can't listen to this. You know, this is really going to corrupt their minds, which I think is really interesting where we've come to that point.
It is really interesting. I mean, the kind of like horror genre or whatever. It was such a big part. Like I even remember I was really scared of Eminem. Like I thought that was scary. Like all the stuff about killing Kim and like putting her in a trunk and throwing her off so I think what's been interesting for me as a musician is there was a lot of music that I found, and I'll even put like Metallica in this category, where I heard it and I was scared. I became agitated and upset. And much of my adult life, especially as like as I am a part of like alternative modern rock or whatever, has been attempting to kind of like understand and engage with a lot of this music that I found frightening on some level to me.
It's funny you say it because one of your biggest songs, Blood in the Cut, is kind of a scary song, scary video. Like I was like, I went on your YouTube page yesterday to like, refresh and like, and I like noticed that there's like a advisory that comes up when you watch the Blood in the Cut video, like a viewer discretion thing. So it's kind of funny that the music that you were scared of, you've kind of become part of a little bit.
Well, to bring it all full circle to the therapy beginning, in a sense, like we're talking about exposure therapy, like things that scare you often are actually like connected to something that might be important to engage with in terms of like your own liberation and your own kind of like leveling up as a human being. Actually, I was going to say about parents being shocked. I feel like Lil Nas X is having that moment. But yeah, I mean, for me, I think making music that's aggressive, and I can't talk too much about it now, but the music that's coming up for me, that's coming out, is heavy. And I think like
Demi loves that. Demi loves heavy stuff.
Oh, then you're gonna like this. You're gonna like this. It's like, but okay. So to backtrack to your original question, break stuff. Limp Bizkit is sort of in this world of like bro rock, violence, new metal, sort of like I think anti-woman in a sense. There's like
punching,
right, and so there's all these associations. And I think to me, what's exciting about covering a song is totally recontextualizing it. And for me, break stuff was the big challenge. The reason that I wanted to do it is because the first line of the song kept coming to me during COVID, at the beginning of COVID.
Just one of those days where you don't want to wake up.
Yeah, everything. Yeah. Can I swear?
Yeah.
Everything is fucked and everybody sucks. And I just like, I think for a lot of us, this pandemic, for the calm, polite people, it has, you feel like, what am I supposed to do? I normally get to like be on stage and yell and get it out that way. I have no way to get it out. I'm stuck in my house. And I wanted to see if I could find a way to engage with that sentiment of aggression and frustration and recontextualize it in what I hope is a self-aware manner. And that was really like, I tried doing that cover a bunch of different ways. That thing was like a pain in my ass, but I felt really proud of where it ended up, to be honest.
It's hard to find that perfect line where you're not making fun of the song, but you're not just rehashing the song as well.
Correct. And I think like what I, sort of one of my over oh, that's quite a compliment. One of my overarching goals with this is like, okay, well, I'm a woman. I've been socialized as such, and I'm very comfortable being vulnerable and open. For a lot of young boys and men, they are not socialized to feel comfortable with that kind of like really raw emotionality. And I think a lot of music that's made by men, particularly in the 90s, did have a lot of real emotion in it, but was expressed in this incredibly angry way, an incredibly aggressive way. And so I wanted to kind of like reframe that and reconsider it. Like Self-Esteem by The Offspring is a devastatingly sad song, actually.
It is really sad. Yeah.
And so I think like with break stuff, I'm trying to come at it, I guess, with some compassion and say like, well, if you felt like totally enclosed and unable to express yourself your whole life to the point where all you want to do is just break something, how can I sing about that in my own way, because I'm feeling that too.
One of the coolest thing about your vocals is that it's almost, half the time it sounds like you're rapping, it sounds like you're spitting straight fire, but you're also singing. It's this like very unique style that I can recognize immediately as you. I wanted to know, how did you develop this sort of style? Where did it come from?
It developed very naturally. I don't have any kind of like formal musical training in any way. I just started making music for fun. And I initially was kind of existing in a more kind of like indie rap world. And so rhythm kind of had primacy over melody in that period of time. And I think, I don't think there was ever any kind of like where I took a step back and even thought about it. I think as I've experimented with different genres, and, I've been really influenced by all the people I've toured with, because I've been on all types of tours. I've played like literally any type of show you can imagine, but just watching people like perform on stage, I think, has affected me. I mean, to be honest with you, playing Warped Tour, which I did for a whole summer in 2014, when I put my first full-length record out, that was really influential. That was the first time, I mean, going back to like Jordan talking about scary music, that was the first time I had been at like a hardcore show. And I was like,
who the headliners were the year that you played Warped Tour? Do you remember who the headliners were?
Okay, some of the
just for
headliners,
context,
For context, well, I mean, I remember there was a band. I don't know if they were a headliner.
Like, who do you remember like being around, like bands you were around during that time? Because on the Warped Tour, there's a lot of camaraderie too with the different acts.
There is a lot of camaraderie. I mean, I shared a bus actually with a band called Plague Vendor, who is awesome. I love those dudes.
Hard.
And Brandon, who's the singer, is like one of those performers where you're like, oh my God, you're like a rock star. And there was a band, Marmosettes, who was playing, that was kind of connected with them. And so a lot of but that's not like the super heavy stuff. I remember there was a band called Ice Nine Kills. I'm pretty sure that's the name of the band. And I was like, that was really scary. Actually, here's a memory. There's a band called Chelsea Grin. Again, I was like kind of interested in the bands that were on the monster stage, which was like the scary stage.
Right. Which stage were you playing this? Which stage were you on?
I was on like I was on the outsiders stage. So I think at that time it was called SoundCloud or Spotify. It was like the side. It was like these people like kind of don't fit in, but they kind of do fit in.
And this is kind of like from the Life as a Dog era-ish, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is like when that record came out.
Yeah.
And I just remember that band Chelsea Grin. I don't even know. I'm not sure what they're up to at this point, but the guitarist, hit like the guitar must have been tuned in like drop like B or something, like so low, hit this like demonic note, and then the singer got up and just like went like this across his neck with like the scariest look on his face, and I was like, am I about to die? Like it honestly scared the shit out of me.
You're like, I'm just an indie rapper, like.
Yeah, but there were bands like, you know, The Story So Far was a headliner that year.
Phrase band. Like, that's what I call. I call those phrase bands where their names is literally a phrase. You know,
correct.
The alternative press type bands. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of bands like Motionless in White was on that summer, which is like they're also kind of scary. Yeah, that summer really was I felt like an anthropologist. It was very, very interesting.
Yeah. One thing I know you're a big Outkast fan.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a big Outkast fan. And I'm curious, what's your favorite Outkast album?
Oh, oh man. You know, this just came up because I was whatever. This came up in a conversation. In a way, ATLiens is only because, or I shouldn't say only, it doesn't necessarily have all of my favorite songs. Like I feel like Speakerboxxx Love Below might be actually if I took a step back, but in terms of me getting introduced to them and it's that memory of hearing a band or a group or an artist who is doing something that is so different. And I can remember when I first heard that record, I was in college and I just couldn't believe it. And I'd heard like obviously Outkast singles and stuff on the radio, but like really digging into the catalog in that way was exciting for me. What's your answer to this question?
I'm a big Aquemini fan. I love Aquemini. And the reason I really like it is because I think it's a good bridge album. I'm a fan of bridge albums, because I think that you talk about ATLiens was more of a straight Southern hip hop album.
Right.
And Aquemini got into like more live instrumentation and orchestral arrangements. I mean, I think about a song like Liberation, which is almost goes into like a Quincy Jones style film score at the end. And they brought in, and the time this is, late 90s, you're talking boy bands and Bad Boy Records sampling everything that's around them. And then you have this Southern rap group who brings in real bass players, real piano, drums, and makes this album. So yeah, I guess I am just kind of like an advocate for that era of Outkast, but I was curious how you felt about it.
Yeah, I think, it's with certain bands, and I'm sure you guys can relate on a number of levels. There's just like nostalgia you have for records that you can't explain, because I think what's amazing about music is that for many of us, it's not just about the songs, it's about the time of life when you listen to those songs and where you were at and who you were meeting and the kinds of experiences you were having. So for me, that record is deeply associated with like a time.
Right. Right. Totally.
Zachary Lake, he's saying, hey, K.Flay, what is your favorite DAW? I'm using Ableton, but wondering what you recommend. So what's your tech situation up at the studio? Oh,
my tech situation. Okay, actually, I was just talking about Ableton 11. So I'm, if you can believe it, I'm still Ableton 10 over here. But I track all my vocals in Pro Tools, which is just kind of how I learned on Pro Tools, and I know Ableton 11 has playlisting, so that kind of changes the game. But I'm super quick tracking my vocals in Pro Tools, and then I do all my other production elements in Ableton, and usually record like demo vocals in Ableton, but end up doing my kind of final takes in Pro Tools. And we run the live show through Ableton as well. So largely Ableton, and then I'm like a OG Pro Tools, can't let it go kind of girl.
And is your studio you're in right now, is that your home studio?
This is not. So this is an external. I go somewhere.
Because I was curious if you're one of these people you get up at 1 a.m., 2 a.m. Now that you're on this disciplined schedule, where you go to bed after the Golden Girls.
Right.
if you're one of these people, do you get up in the middle of the night and start writing down lyrics, try to like do a scratch recording of a guitar riff? Like, how much are you that kind of person?
Well, we have a home studio. So my girlfriend's a musician as well, and a touring artist. So we have a studio at home, which is like fully functional. And, actually I did the whole covers record there just at home. But then we have like this external studio where I go to. But you know what? I never like wake up in the middle of the night and have ideas. Whenever I like hear interviews with musicians who say that, I'm just like, not me. I'm just sleeping. I'm really not doing anything interesting, or I'm worrying about random things that, I'm like ruminating. So the inspiration doesn't strike in the middle of the night. But that being said, I do have the capability to record it if it were to strike.
You've had such a successful career, K.Flay. I want to know, was there any hardships? Like, what was a point where you were like, what's going on? Like, you know what I mean? Or was it just always up?
No,
It was always up. Yeah.
No, there have definitely been. I mean, I think, the kind of the biggest reckoning I had, and sort of like the gauntlet that I had to go through was actually right before and as I was making that first full-length record of mine called Life as a Dog, which was just about 7 years ago. So I kind of like right out the gate got signed to RCA. I got a record deal when I was very, very green. Like I did not know what I was doing. And I got put through, what is a
The
pretty
ringer.
typical,
I call it the label ringer, where they just
yeah, the label ringer, and it's very typical, and it's basically like, oh, you're a young artist. Here, we'll put you in with a lot of producers, and we'll throw a lot of shit at the wall, and we'll see what sticks. And while I think that works for some artists, for me it was a very disorienting process, a very confusing process, and I think I got further and further away from making the music that I liked, or even knowing what I liked. So I got dropped from that deal after a couple of years. And that was really like the biggest moment of reckoning, because I think, when you're signed, you sort of feel like you're on a treadmill and it's moving, and you know where to go, and there's people to help you. And when you're off that treadmill, you kind of have to ask yourself, do I want to do this? Do I still have like the fire and the passion? What am I good at it? Apparently, maybe not. And so I think that was the biggest reckoning in many ways. But, since that time, and that was really, I guess, to finish the story, my manager and I started a little like indie label for me, and crowdfunded the record and put it out. And that ended up really being the catalyst for kind of my career in many ways. So it was a really important process. But there've been a lot of moments. I think life on the road is it's hard on mental and physical health. It's a total joy, but there's a cost to it as well, and it's a difficult negotiation. So there've certainly been moments, I think, when I wasn't really taking care of myself that well, and I didn't have balance.
But you've never been a big drug and alcohol person.
No, I've definitely had periods though.
This is turning into like behind the music, for each one behind the music.
Yeah, let's go. I mean, I'm honestly an open book. Yeah, I think, the thing that I've had to negotiate is really, I've never been interested in drugs or used them. That even includes weed, which I know doesn't even really count or whatever. But yeah, for me, I think the negotiation of alcohol has been the real thing that I've had to deal with, because, alcohol is so institutionalized on tour. It is like currency. When you're first touring, like, you often get no food in the green room, but you get beer. You definitely get beer. And so it is, I think I basically don't know any touring musician who has not had to have a real like reckoning process and negotiation around alcohol.
It's part of the culture. Demi and I filmed a video in a rehearsal space here in one of those like rent by the hour rehearsal spaces, and they have beer available at the front desk. You can get a an XLR cable, and you can also get a Coors Light at the same desk.
Totally. And that's what I mean by like it is institutionalized. And so I think, you know, for me, I have two dads, a biological dad and then another dad who raised me and adopted me. But my biological dad was a pretty severe alcoholic and died because of that. And when I was young, and so I grew up with a very kind of black and white, like alcohol is bad, so I won't drink it. And then of course I grew up and became a musician, and yet, you know, and then kind of had to go through this process of like, okay, I'm going to experiment with drinking. What does it feel like? Do I like it? Is it making my life better? Is it making my life worse? How is it? And kind of negotiating those things. And, you know, that's been a lot of my music. I talk about it because for me, just from a personal history perspective, because of my dad, there's so much tied up in it. You know, like it's something I think about quite a bit.
Both of my grandfathers meant, dad and mom's side were alcoholics, and it's almost been like a thing for me where it's a specter kind of in the distance that I've never really drank that much or party that I'm not one of these people who loves alcohol to begin with, but that when you know it's in your family, it's kind of an ominous thing, you know.
I mean, I think specter is a good word.
Specter, yeah.
It really does. It feels like that. So it feels like a lot of my decision making around alcohol is imbued with this this gravitas of like the history, you know. So figuring out what's good for me has taken time, but I feel like, you know, I've been able to do that, and it's been a process that's actually brought me a lot of like insight in many ways.
I'm curious, you know, you went through the ringer at RCA, and we've had people on the show all the time who have done the independent and major label thing. And you had the successes of Life as a Dog, and then you went back to the major label system, signed with Interscope to release Everywhere Somewhere, which was really your breakout, your most well-known songs around that album. Yep. So what was behind the decision, and what about the experience at Interscope was such an improvement?
Well, so the real kind of linchpin there was Dan Reynolds, who is the lead singer of Imagine Dragons and like an amazing songwriter in person in general. And he emailed me. So I was like getting ready to put out my next record independently, and I got contacted by him. He had heard some of the demos, and he was wanting to start an imprint on Interscope. And he wanted to sign an artist, and he wanted to talk to me about it. And, you know, Dan's been through his fair share of kind of industry experiences. And I think, you know, had a lot of compassion for me in that situation, in terms of knowing that I was seeking creative freedom, but also was looking for like support to distribute my music and get it out. And really, you know, I signed that deal because of Dan. And Dan was a huge champion for me within the building. You know, I think what's really tough about major labels for a lot of young artists is there's a lot of acts. You know, they've signed tons of bands, and it's just hard to get attention and resources by virtue of that. So having Dan as my advocate and kind of as like my guide in a lot of ways really made all the difference. And, you know, Dan was just super, super kind to me, and, you know, took me on tour. I toured with Imagine Dragons across the US and all of Europe, UK, and just learned so much. I mean, you know, I'd been touring in clubs and small theaters up until that point, and then we're in arenas, and that's a whole different ball game. So he was really the reason for that deal, and I think, you know, in many ways the reason that it was successful and a good place for me to be.
you were a little bit older than some artists who break out. You were in your late 20s, early 30s when you really hit your stride. Do you think that maturity helped you?
For me, yeah. I mean, I'm in general a late bloomer. Like that's just me. So I'm I sort of at this point just expect that I will do things like 5 years later than everybody, 5 to 10 years later than everybody else. But I do think having that sense of self and having my friends and having kind of my personal understanding very, very fully formed when that all went down was helpful, because it's, you know, you guys talk to a lot of artists. It's confusing, and a lot of people are telling you lots of different things about you, which is weird. And if you're not pretty firmly tied to friends and family who like really have your best interests and really know you, that can be kind of like devastating in certain ways, I think.
What makes you stand out so much to me, even compared to all the other artists we've had on this show, is like you're an advocate of doing your own damn thing. You refuse to be put in a box. I just want to know, how were you able to stand your ground throughout your career?
Well, okay, I should give a big shout out to my manager, Seth. So we've been working together since, you know, we're day one. And I was his first client. So I think in many ways we've been able to develop together, and our collective attitude has been one of really staying true to our beliefs and our perspective in a lot of ways. And, you know, having his support and just knowing like my best friend is my manager, he has my back. If I told him like, hey dude, I need to quit music like now, he'd be like, okay. You know, just knowing that there's that safe place, I think it's a huge part of it. We love you, Seth. Wow. I hope he's watching, because I sometimes I pick on him. I rag on him sometimes.
I like the 90s emoticon heart too. That's a nice touch.
So I think, Demi, that's part of it. And then I think, you know, maybe Jordan, to connected to what you were saying, being like a little more grown up and having just had like the time to develop as a human being. And, you know, I'm very close with my family. I'm very close with my friends. They hold me really accountable. And I think, you know, reliability and accountability are two of the most powerful things in life. You know, I think when you are really held to account for your behavior and your work, you produce better work, and you behave in a conscious and compassionate manner. And you know, I think though that kind of groundwork has helped me to say, you know what, like, hey, this feels right or this doesn't feel right. And to honestly have the confidence and kind of self-esteem to go out there and just say like, hey, I'm going to do me. You know, maybe I'm messing up. Maybe it's not great. Maybe I'll be like humiliated by this later, which has certainly been the case. But at least I'm trying, and I'm trying to be me, and I'm trying to be authentic.
Before we let you go, you mentioned upcoming music a little bit briefly. How much can you tell us about maybe not just your upcoming EP album, whatever you're working on, but also live shows? Like, what projects do you have going on the next, you know, few months over the summer? What's your summer looking like?
Well, summer. So yeah, I mean, without saying too much, I have been working hard on new music, which I'm very, very excited to release into the world pretty soon. This summer, really, I've got some dates on the books, actually rescheduled from last spring, I guess. So I was opening up a few shows for Louis the Child, which is a duo that I've collaborated with on a couple songs for their records. So those are on the books for this summer. But other than that, it's really just new music on the way. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And, you know, continuing to wake up at 7 a.m. and like, you know, stay on my stay on my routine as long as I possibly can until I get thrown into the vortex of confusion.
Absolutely. Well, we look forward to whatever you come up with, and we'll be listening. And we really appreciate you coming on our show and sharing all your background and all your heart with us, honestly.
Yeah, no, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate the conversation. And yeah, I feel like, the pandemic has, I think, underlined for a lot of us how unpredictable and surprising life is. And I think what's interesting is like everything always makes sense in retrospect, but when you're in it, it sometimes feels like just a bunch of disparate elements. So I would encourage anybody watching or listening to just keep that in mind, that like it might seem confusing now, but it will make sense later. And you will probably look back even on the terrible things with like some degree of fondness.
Great advice. Great advice. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for listening to It's Real with Jordan and Demi. You can go to popdust.com for an archive of all our past shows. And of course, you can listen to all our past episodes on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever else you get your podcasts. So until next week, we have Earth Eater next week, which is a really cool show. Can't wait for that. So we will see you next time, and have a good week, everybody.
Take care.